Hey there, I'm Kevin. Let's talk about queer stuff in Jesus, and let's talk about why celibacy is not something that you should be mandating for anybody. Funny story, because I always like to start out these things with stories. When I first came out of the closet, one of my friends literally asked me, so are you going to be like a practicing homosexual? If you've been around conservative circles or you come from a conservative Christian background, you know that means like, are you going to engage in the lifestyle? Really, the question should be, are you going to engage in a romantic relationship with somebody of the same sex, or are you going to choose celibacy? Because there is this belief that gets passed around conservative Christian land that basically says that it's okay to be attracted to someone of the same sex as long as you don't act on those attractions. And so if you're not acting on those attractions and you're only attracted to someone of the same sex, basically that means that you are mandated to a life of celibacy, foregoing any sort of romantic relationship or sexual encounter with someone of the same sex, or any sex for that matter, if you're not married. And there's two issues with this. The first problem is mandating celibacy for anybody actually goes against the tradition of what we have seen as the vocation and gift of celibacy that we've celebrated over the past, 2,000 years of church tradition. Second issue is that the line of thinking that it's okay to be attracted to someone of the same sex without actually acting on those feelings is okay, isn't actually biblically tenable either. So let's dive into the first part about why celibacy is a gift and not a mandate. If you look at the creation story in Genesis 2, God says it's not good for man to be alone. Jesus says in the New Testament in Matthew 19, celibacy can only be accepted by those to whom it is given. So again, it is a gift, not something you can tell somebody that they have to give themselves to. And in 1 Corinthians chapter 7, Paul even says that he wishes everybody could be celibate, but he understands that not everybody is going to be that way, that not everyone has that gift. So if you tell gay Christians who are only attracted to someone of the same sex that they are mandated into a life of celibacy, that's really in tension with what we've held up as the vocation of celibacy for, the past couple of millennia. And you might look at me and say, Kevin, what about straight people? What about people who just end up not being married? Wouldn't they be mandated to have the same kind of celibacy? True, if we want to take that line of thinking, that if you're not married, you should never engage in any sort of sexual activity ever, then yes, straight people should also be kind of bound to the same idea of remaining chaste until married. But that's the problem. If you're a straight person, you always have the option, you always have the ability to find some sort of romantic partner that would be acceptable in a conservative Christian ethic around same-sex relationship. But if you are someone who is exclusively attracted to somebody of the same sex, that removes your choice. A straight person can always choose to stay chaste, but with a gay person, you take away their choice in that matter. And that's when it gets problematic, because celibacy as a vocation, really for like the first 1,500 years of the church, was seen as a higher calling than marriage, because it was meant to point to our ultimate union, which was a union with God, our spiritual union with God, and the union of the church to Christ, the bridegroom. If someone wants to choose celibacy, by all means, I believe it's a beautiful and high calling. However, I do not believe that you can mandate that for anyone. And you might be wondering how this is damaging, but we'll get to that in a second. So let's talk about the line of thinking that says it's okay to be attracted to someone of the same sex as long as you're not acting on those attractions. If we look at what Jesus said on the Sermon on the Mount, he kind of pointed out that it's not just about the actions you do with your life, but it's about the way that you think, the way your heart is postured. So he said, if you even look at a woman lustfully, you've committed adultery in your heart. If you are angry with someone, you've committed murder in your heart. So it's not just about not having sex with someone who's not your spouse, not murdering someone. Jesus elevated religion to not just say, it's not just about what you do, but it is about your heart, because Jesus knew that from the overflow of the heart, the mouth speaks, the body does. Let's apply that same model. Even if you look at someone of the same sex lustfully, you have committed a sexual act with them in your heart. See how that doesn't work out? It makes no more sense to say, it's okay for you to be greedy as long as you don't steal. So what do we do with all this? I think we need to make a big distinction between external temptation and internal desire. Again, for example, committing adultery. That is an external temptation. Stealing something, external temptation. Wanting to murder somebody because they really pissed you off, that's an external temptation. Sexual orientation, sexual desire, those are things that come from within. And those are also things that are based in choice. I'm choosing to have sex with someone other than my spouse. I'm choosing to steal something. I'm choosing to murder somebody. Sexual orientation is not a choice, which I know for some people might be a shocker that we didn't choose to be gay, we didn't choose to be bisexual, trans, queer, etc. If you're a straight person watching this, when did you choose to like somebody of the opposite sex? You didn't, right? It just kind of happened that way. Same thing, I didn't choose to be attracted to boys. it just kind of happened that way. My entire life growing up with ex-gay therapy and saying that it's okay to be attracted to people but not ever act on those things, like, was so problematic for me, because I began to hate myself because I couldn't ever get rid of those desires. I couldn't satiate them, and I couldn't ever act on them. So I learned to hate them. I learned to hate my sexual orientation, and that hate turned into depression and anxiety. And there's so many people who fall into the same category because we were not accepted. We were unable to flourish as humans, and many of us are on the other side of this thing, dealing with mental health problems as a result. In earlier videos, I've talked about how rejection and the bad fruit of this kind of theology leads to self-harm, drug abuse, risky sexual behavior, suicidal ideations, and even suicide in so many people. That's not good fruit. And I don't think that's what the church fathers or the writers of the Bible were talking about when they were talking about sexual purity, or celibacy for that matter. You can even look at the failed ex-gay movement, which after they closed their doors, I believe it was 2013, Alan Chambers, who was the president of Exodus at the time, even said that 99% of people who were seeking to change their sexual orientation could not, because it's not a thing. Really, if you're trying to mandate somebody into a life of celibacy, you're not mandating a life of holiness. You're actually condemning people to a life of loneliness. You're condemning people to a life of self-hate. You're condemning people to a life of being separate from who they were created to be, literally tearing at their spirit. That theology that you can be attracted to someone of the same sex but not act on those things may seem harmless, but just to review, undermines the actual vocation and call of celibacy and the role of celibate people in the life of the church. And secondly, it doesn't make any logical sense, and it doesn't make any biblical sense. Thirdly, it causes more damage than we are aware of. Celibacy is a gift, not a mandate. Thank you so much for watching this video. If it was good for you, go ahead and like, share, and subscribe. You can connect with me over on my blog, which is down below, on all the social medias, and go ahead and leave a comment. Have people used this kind of logic on you before? What are ways that you approach this conversation around people mandating celibacy for queer individuals? I'd love to hear more about your experiences. So let's have a conversation below. Thanks so much, and I'll talk to you next time. Bye.